Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a rather impromptu stream discussion. As I'm sure some of you noticed that the title had changed earlier today. I had received a DM earlier from Semiagog letting me know that there was sort of a power outage, a little bit of a force majeure that had limited our access for today. Thankfully, he has power now, so thank God for that. Things are good on his end and things like that. So we're going to have our stream on deglobalization set for another weekend, which is good because this allows me to focus more time on the future on the other large geopol project that myself, Semiagog, and Charlemagne are working on. So hello, all of you, and hopefully we're not going to have any issues today. So I get to do this. So hello, I hope everyone is doing great. I'm probably not going to um, worry too much about what on earth is going on, but in his regard, because he's told me he's doing much better now. So today, I wanted to talk about some of the other stuff that has been going on because it's kind of been a wild couple of weeks, a bit of celebration, a little bit of cocked eyebrows and caution when it comes to what's happening with regards to Twitter. And as much as I've been enjoying it, and we talked about it earlier this week when we did the whole digital archipelago episode on the subject of the Bird app. There are other things that I wanted to talk about that we can get a chance to touch on in that stream, and I thought that it would be fun to think about sort of the social ecology aspect of it all. And so that's some of the things that I wanted to talk about today. So as you can tell from the lovely image here that we've got going on, this is going to have some sort of Twitter amnesty come Monday. And this has been in the midst of various Antifa-related accounts, well-known doxing rings, and activist groups that call for left-leaning violence. They've been banned off of Twitter. And as we discussed earlier this week, it was quite entertaining to see cultural critics and commentators that are usually bashing straight, cisgendered, heterosexual white male authors get banned or have their posts taken down on Mastodon. So it's been lethargic. It's been it's been cathartic. I've been sort of lethargic about talking about this. That's why we're doing the stream. But it's been very much enjoyable. However, I think that there's going to be a lot more things to come that are a bit concerning. So I guess we'll start off with the big one. So Twitter amnesty. So, as the thumbnail showed, we've got a poll that he's been doing for a while to sort of give legitimacy to some of his policy-making decisions over as the CEO of Twitter. He did this with Trump being reinstated back on Twitter, which he's not tweeted anything. He's sort of stuck on Truth Social either by contractual means or that he just has more control over it. I think that that's really bad for Trump if he wants to run for re-election, but neither here nor there. And that comes in the midst that Elon Musk today was talking about the need for Ron DeSantis to be running for president of the United States in 2024. So there's a lot of this push now from everyone saying, even the Lincoln Project did a video a couple weeks ago saying like, broke Donald Trump, and woke being Ron DeSantis. And even now, those people are going to call him the next Austrian painter anyways, as every Republican candidate has been the next Austrian painter since the Austrian painter. So, I mean, here we are. But the thing that came to my mind was that, all of these banned accounts, all of these individuals coming back and talking about what's going to happen here on Twitter has me thinking about what on earth that's going to look like. So, for instance, we viewed the ban, and I should take a step back. We'll start here first. Why am I talking about Twitter? Why am I having this conversation? Why on earth am I caring about a website that, at any point in time we can expect to get banned or get clipped or mass report, doxxed, etc. about it? And the reason why is because, as we've seen from Elon Musk's takeover, and as we've seen from various individuals listening and replying to tweets such as myself and others, that Twitter does have a significant sphere of influence on the public discourse, as well as what the media and news chyrons are going to say tomorrow. As I've noted not too long ago, you've had everyone from people like Orrin McIntyre to Pedro Gonzalez to Shoe on Head to Zero HP Lovecraft being referenced on Tucker Carlson. And we've had I've had more mutuals than I care to count now be on Tucker Carlson's original show, where he just does her hour-long interviews with people, whether that's people like Charles Haywood or Catherine D, and numerous others that have worked within that project, and even now Raw Nationalist, right, in that whole End of Men documentary. So that stuff does give and lend some significant influence, the same way that it does provide a intellectual nexus in regards to how can we take certain ideas and bring them towards mainstream appeal. I think Orrin McIntyre is still probably one of our best interlocutors in that regard, academic agent surely for across the pond, and even now in the mainstream discourse. I mean, there are plenty of Americans that have read The Populist Delusion, and so on and so forth. I mean, these are the things that that come to my mind in illustrating, hey, this ecosystem has a pretty big impact on the rest of sort of the media discussion and politics of today, and most likely tomorrow for the foreseeable future. And so, I've seen multiple ban waves. Anyone who's been on Twitter even longer than myself, I came on right before the 2020 election when I started this YouTube channel. I never really paid much attention to it prior, and feel like that's why anytime that someone mentions drama or mentions personalities from years past, if I didn't watch it on YouTube or a specific streaming platform, I feel like an idiot that hasn't been brought up on the deep esoteric history of just internet right-wing lore, but neither here nor there. So even in the short time that I've been on, there's been dozens of ban waves. There have been great accounts and individuals that get clipped. And on one hand, it always feels like they're dead in a little ways. Like you'll see people like, oh man, I hope he comes back. I hope he's happy wherever he's at, like he's probably in a better place. He's got his real life. He's exited the Matrix. All is well with him. And we hope that he comes back in ingesting this digital ayahuasca that both transports us into a transhumanist astral plane, but at the same time allows us to communicate with sort of the eldritch gods of the media complex and calling lefties, losers on Twitter. But those ban waves have always been viewed as, sort of like Darwinistic, or just like the evolutionary, environmental constraints that force species to adapt and create, these new subgroups, these new subspecies, these new environments, these new beings. We evolve and we change into this sort of means and ways that are required for us to post or say things that aren't explicitly edgy. Some individuals and accounts that I really like, Martin's newsletter on Substack. I mean, that guy goes through at least 20 accounts this year, right? But I mean, his stuff is good and he keeps coming back and people listen to him. And it's sort of an aspect of community that exists within Twitter. I mean, I know for the fact that not everyone who's on Twitter is going to go to YouTube or other places, because I know, because I have like 8,000 people that subscribe here and I have over 10,500 that subscribe or follow me on Twitter. So it does illustrate that they are different ecosystems. But in that ecosystem and in this sort of ecological pressure for an evolutionary environment, I feel like a very different kind of strata of, accounts, people who post often, people that are sort of considered leaders or somewhat of community heads and bigwigs. Similarly to how people in YouTube would refer to things like, oh, that's the academic agent sphere, or oh, those are the people that Orrin McIntyre has interviewed. Oh, that's where Keith Woods and his crowd are usually at in regards to ideology or what types of videos they're posting and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, right, this Monday, right, in what, less than 48 hours now, we're going to see this sort of great Twitter Jubilee take place. And, I can imagine quite a few banned accounts, various famous individuals from Frog Twitter, I'd imagine, will come back. Everyone's hoping for BAP's original account to come back, but I think he's quite happy going as Beach Stud or whatever. But to me, what comes to my mind is that it's going to show it's like those animations where two galaxies collide and the spiral arms are all sort of getting interacted, and every part of your normal solar system or your local group of your galaxy is going to be totally rearranged, and everything is going to be out of whack and out of order. And so what immediately comes to my mind is, well, the system or the ecosystem that we know is going to face some substantial changes. And if this recent bit of news with regards to the Mar-a-Lago visit and accounts that are getting behind that, you're going to see sort of this renewed return, and I don't know if that's or most likely I want to say it's for worse rather than for better. But this return to maybe 2016, 2017 era style of Twitter and YouTube politics that definitely does feel like a return to the sensible center. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the reason why I'm thinking about all of this is because, well, a lot of people that have made it big have only managed to exist in this current, pre-Elon Twitter sphere and ecosystem where people would get banned occasionally. This is why we tell people that, listen, if you want to dunk on blue check marks, you have to be very careful that they don't have like a rabid fan base, or they'll mass report you or mass flag your tweets and take your account down. That's why it's always best to just screen cap whatever you want to comment on rather than quote tweet directly, because that goes a long way in that regard, right? Just the general sort of safety rules and measures that anytime that some FNG account comes onto Twitter and be like, well, help me find my friends, or to just start posting, it's like, okay, well, here are the ways to not get your head blown off in the first like 5 hours of posting on Twitter. And so with this return of accounts, Lord only knows what that's going to look like. We've noticed that Carl Benjamin has gotten his original Sargon of Akkad account back, which is one led to hilarious tweets getting deleted from the olden days in his terms of dunking on the alt-right. And at the same time, right, it's brought in a brand new influx of following and followers towards this side of things. And that's led to a conversation about, what are some ideological right-wing things that we could call sensible centrism. So, like lower immigration, pro-family, being relatively pro-life, and making sure that we don't live in a corporate oligarchy. Basic things that we tell ourselves all the time, right? In these ecosystems and in these YouTube channels. I myself have done it more times than I'd like to admit, where I tell people that your views are normal. You are a regular person. You're not someone who is an extremist that thinks that we should be deracinated, atomized individuals, and that there should be, trans women, clerical, individuals at your church and things like that and so on, that you should be able to live your life without having people constantly harangue you and harass you over things like the Great Replacement. And so there's been this rhetorical strategy pulled out by Carl and AA and a few others have talked about it, that should be the sensibly centrist position, that, the far right should be like, the land of Gilead from the Handmaid's Tale. And then the far left is whatever we're currently living in now. And I think that that's an interesting rhetorical tactic. I think a few people sort of attacked it, saying that he's sort of returned to his roots. I think he knows what he's doing. Doesn't mean that there's going to be some cringe along the way. But I find it to be a particularly interesting tool to see what comes out. Like, there's going to be this new camp of posters and Twitter accounts about being sensible centrists. And it's like, what do you mean? I'm just, here to support the nuclear family and single parent households, and not to have my local city turn into the next giga favela longhouse. I'm a sensible centrist. I don't want to be like those extreme far right guys that want to, do all the stuff that we already have included in the center. So it'd be interesting to see what gets labeled as extreme right or far right in this policy. But funny how most things that are considered far right extremist policies are just things that were normal 50 years ago, but neither here nor there. So I find that there's going to be this very strange upheaval, an entering of old heads and such coming back and looking at their Twitter, and maybe they'll be like the elder gods that have wakened up and they're just like, well, this place is a mess. We should probably do something about it. But at the same time, right, the other thing that comes to my mind is, well, maybe it's a potential return where people will be like, oh, I don't have the following that I once was. The environment is totally different. The accounts that were my reply guys are now these like 25K plus following, thought leaders and so on and so forth. And to me, the other thing that immediately comes to my mind is like, Twitter is great, but you should also have a place to go and do things, especially if you create content and write things and do things that exists outside of Twitter. This is why alt tech has been so important, and that it shouldn't be abandoned. Especially now that Odyssey has gotten a lot better in the last 2 years since I've been around, that it's something that I quite enjoy using. I should probably do more Odyssey exclusive stuff, and I probably will in the future. because while Twitter itself has been uh, provided this strange new reprieve under Elon Musk, this does not mean that the Susans of the world, here on YouTube and other platforms, are still going to give you any reprieve. We know this when it comes to AdSense, when it comes to Stripe, when it comes to bank accounts, when it comes to YouTube channels getting clipped for various reasons. So I do think that perhaps one thing that may happen is that while Twitter may be a place for edginess, that edginess may spill over and in turn affect some of the projects that have been done on YouTube as well. The good thing is that any sensible individual with a YouTube channel in these spheres already has their alt tech platforms, whether they're on Telegram, Gab, Subscribestar, Substack, their own blogging website, crypto, etc., and things like that, which I am working on, by the way. I know someone was asking about crypto, so I'm working on that. But I find this to be an interesting sort of thing that is about to unfold, and I'm talking about this as we sort of stand towards the precipice and we're looking down and we're trying to have a good understanding of what on earth is to happen and what is to come from it. So I think that the social ecology of Twitter will change. I think that the media environment right now has its people that they like to follow. I don't know if we're going to see, random suspended accounts, whether it's some, anime poster or whatever that comes back. And, it's not like the Claremont Institute, or it's not like, the American Affairs Journal is going to be taking a keen interest in this account that has been banned since 2017. And they seem to have their favored people that they like to follow, or at least, parse ideas from and try and sell them towards a more sensible mainstream and the body politic writ large, or at least the people in Washington, which is who you would really want to influence here in the United States above all else. There is a distinct lack of, actual policy paper, white paper, position paper kind of arguments that come out of the right wing these days. And there are places that do it. I know that Claremont's got their own think tank, and they've got stuff like that. But I'm saying our guys don't. I was talking about this on Telegram a while back, and this is something that we'd like to do, and we'll probably get to it in the future with the Old Glory Club. But, I was thinking a while back, and I'm going to go a little, maybe 5 or so years ago, 6 years ago. My mind was thinking about Spencer's The National Policy Institute, but without the chicanery. And if you manage to have a rather sensible frog Twitter, like set aside policy positions, papers, things. I said this yesterday with Christopher Sandbach. I said, whoever can start writing these sort of positions and papers, so say like Raw Egg Nationalist, right? If someone could take the Eggs Benedict option and turn that into a full-length policy proposal paper that you could send off to other think tanks and conservative pundits and institutions that said, here is a plan to get the microplastics out of every scrotum of an American males in the United States. And we can do it in 5 years, boost tea, and make this place a healthier, less diabetic, less obese place. I feel like that guy's king to some extent. You still need institutional control, but to go back to an idea that I was talking about at the very beginning of my channel, I think that Twitter and really all of my lifetime's electoral politics has been homeopathic. It's been like these really tiny particulates, like a granule of sugar, and you put it into your coffee as a sweetener, and you think that somehow that means that you've sweetened your coffee, or that really means that you're an enlightened person on political policy. There are policy wonks out there on the right, and here's a little bit of my naivete. I liked Paul Ryan in 2012 because he was like a policy wonk that reminded me of like the 1990s Jack Kemp. And I was like, oh man, this guy's got like a plan. He's got like this thing to talk about how we've spent over $1 trillion on the Great Society and it's failed. And of course, all that goes to hell in a handbasket anyway because of how Washington works. But, that sort of discourse is relatively gone in mainstream politics. Now it's more or less, it's almost as if we're sliding into idiocracy, almost as if everything is about, the hashtag, the key catchphrase, and I'm just as bad for this because politics now is mimetic. It's very tiny particulates that try to explicate an entire political ideology or a policy position or how government should work, a particular political theology. And it does really behoove you, the listener, the viewer, the reader, etc., to hear these things and to hope that whoever's talking about them can point you in the right direction for what you want to listen to or hear about, or what does this guy really mean? Like, what does academic agent mean when he says boomer truth regime? Well, he can hopefully point you to the video that says, what is boomer truth regime? The same way when the countercurrents guys talk about the Nuremberg moral paradigm, they should point you to the article that says that, right? And so on and so forth. Sometimes mimetic stuff doesn't need an explanation. I think if Orrin McIntyre's "Don't Make Me Tap the Sign," it's not rocket science, kids. It's not rocket science. They just want to diddle kids. I mean, that stuff doesn't need someone to point you in the right direction because they're already pointing you, right? Saying like, well, it's not rocket science. This Twitter account is saying that they're coming for your children. But I think that there's an opportunity for that. For instance, I told that AA, I think that his videos about sensible British government policies would be kind of an interesting way to champion this right wing, sensible, centrism sort of route. And so I think that there is going to be some substantial changes to the online rights ecosystem um, in the coming days ahead once Elon Musk sort of takes over Twitter and brings about all these these banned accounts and brings them back from the dead. And who knows, maybe your follower count might because of that. But I'm gonna take a quick look at chat here because I've been neglecting you guys, and so let's take a look around here and see what I'm missing or see what I've missed. But yeah, let's see here. Well, yeah, I guess we can talk about this about Trump in 2020, 2024 versus himself in 2016. He says, I don't think the Trump has the energy anymore, says Blackwater. The 2016 magic is gone. Well, the environment for 20 and some degree, we're all latching on to not I'm not even going to say we. I think that there are individuals, I'm not going to name names or anything like that because I'm not here to like cast aspersions. I'm just saying that I think that this is a general zeitgeist thing more than anything else, that we're going to see a desire to find another Trump. We're going to see this desire to find another dark horse candidate that's going to say the right things, that really gets the engine revving, and we're going to go all in on it. Whether that's this whole Kanye West thing or some other dark horse candidate that we don't know about. For all I know, there's some secret, drafting thing out there to make some unknown Republican candidate or policymaker or even a personality to run for president of the United States. So who knows? I mean, his announcement speech did have a little bit of low energy. And then as soon as he said he was running in 2024, Fox News cut him off. So I think that we're back towards, it's both simultaneously like 2016, but it's not. For Trump, it's like 2016, the fact that a lot of people aren't going to take him seriously. A lot of people don't want him, and he's going to have to fight his way for it. I don't think it's 2016 in the fact that I don't think he has the energy for it. He's not on Twitter. He's not, posting or, shitting on everybody. He's sort of sanctioned himself on to this Truth Social ghetto. And I mean, I'm sure if you use Truth Social, I find it to be a ghetto in the same way that I think Gab is. It doesn't have the same sort of mainstream appeal that Twitter or other social media does. So he sort of gets hampered by that fact. And now you've got this big push now for Ron DeSantis. You've got this Kanye thing, which I don't really know what to make out of. I'm skeptical at best, and downright thinking that something is definitely coordinated at worst. But I do think that there's an issue of energy. However, unless in the next 2 years, right, someone develops the national infrastructure that is required to run an election, especially for president. So I'm talking about like get out the vote stuff, national fundraising, the ability to have a dominating social media presence. And I don't think that DeSantis really knows how to use Twitter the way that he does, despite the fact that he's mastered, right, the Trump mannerisms that he had taken on from the president himself. So I would agree to some extent that, he may not be in for it. The energy is definitely a concern there. But then again, Everyone is ultimately disappointing in politics, and everyone is ultimately disappointed in politics, unless you are personally involved yourself, and there are projects that you can say that you're um, proud of, and things like that. So there's a lot to go off of here as well. But yeah, let's see here. Let me check my audio. Someone's saying that there's mic problems. Okay, no, it says we're good here, but let's just up the mic volume real quick here. Hopefully that solves it. Okay, how about now? Let me know. But anyways. Let's see here. Let's see. The route of certain events says that the route of sensible centrism is the best route we can take. After all, we are the sane ones. After all, we are fighting against insanity. Rather than, well, the first on the list is the derision of academia. Well, I think academia gets derided daily from quite a few places, right? That's the thing, is that we're dealing with the same problems that we've been dealing with, right? That this doesn't end until there are, tanks on Harvard's lawn and we seize the endowments, which, I mean, based, we should be. But academia has been derided for quite a bit of time. I mean, whether it's the Yippies more or less single-handedly refuting a lot of the COVID narratives that we see, or it's the even the more mainstream, National Review type historians and academics that are talking about, even the 1619 Project. Like, I know people on our sort of sphere of things like this have issues with Phil Magnus, but he's done a pretty decent job sort of just calling out the historical illiteracy and insanity that comes with the 1619 Project lady. And in fact, the other day, or not the other day, I say that just as a colloquialism, but a few weeks ago, she had said that she wasn't familiar with the term epistemology, which I'm not surprised for a historical revisionist black academic, but that tends to be the case. But I do find that the idea of rhetorically labeling right-wing things as sensibly centrist is interesting. My concern is, and this goes back to the thing that Dave the Distributist has been very keen to point out, is that what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I am looking for here? I'm sorry. Yeah, words are hard. Yes, Robert, they are. The word I'm looking for is that he kind of says this is a way to not black pill you, but to sort of ground you to reality. It's is that the right wing has a tendency, especially online, we have this huge tendency to, flex power we don't have, and to, say that we're going to do certain things and things like that. That always, we always want to, like even when we talk about trying to seize the endowments of Harvard, right? We want tanks on Harvard Yard. We want, billions must be seized. Millions must fry, right? Things like that. And all that sort of stuff is going to come to my mind when I think about how we talk about that. Because, I mean, to a lot of people, sensible centrism is, Mitt Romney or Adam and Sitch or listened to 5 years ago. It's not anything that I think definitely comes to mind that we would say is sensibly centrist, right? Like, oh, I think, immigration reduction is a sensibly centrist policy. And in my mind, yes, it absolutely is. But also my political worldview, the thing that I have been socialized by online, does not necessarily equate to the reality of the ground when it comes to everyone else's mind. What does matter, however, is can I get the elites to have the idea of sensible centrism be right-wing? That would be the real challenge up ahead. I think that the slight advantage that this does have for sure is one that I think that now more than ever, individuals like us have more ears from the institutions than ever before. I tweeted out the other day about how Tucker Carlson listens to people like Oren or Shoe on Head and stuff like that. Just online personalities have a lot of influence writ large. And I had 4 or 5 people sort of reply back and forth inside there that worked for places like The Blaze or producing it, at Fox News, or worked for some conservative right-wing PAC here in the United States. And that is, I don't say that to flex, and I don't say that to be like, aha, to swing my clout dick around. It's more to explicate the fact that even if someone is lowly and as new as me, who has only been around for 2.5 years and some change, it illustrates that those who have been around a lot longer are going to have a lot more sway on those who are actually listening and have things that they want to say or things that they want to get across. And if you can convince people, whether it's for Chronicles, which I know AA is written for before, or even the what's the word I'm looking for? Even Chronicles, the Claremont Institute, I Am 1776, these things are getting quite a bit more attention. That's good for us because this allows us to get people who have much more power and sway than we do to move things in a further rightward direction. And that's sort of been my idea in regards to, Pedro Gonzalez's whole point about the right wing or the dissident right being heard. Or being listened to. What does that mean? Well, it means that we should push things further rightward because, as my friend Astral had said, is the supposing or is having this presupposition that we should be pushing things to the right even more because the mainstream conservative, even the big institutions that kind of listen to us, like Claremont, like those in that sphere, they'll never go far enough. And that can be read in various ways in regards to do on that. Yes, Richard Crook, he does, because both Shu and a few other people did that whole Balsaniega thread or whatever on the rather kinky advertising, and Tucker Carlson's people picked up on that, and he did a whole bit about it. So yeah, he also read out some tweets by Class Redux Killa from when the Fed post was still a thing. So I mean, yeah, it's a crazy place to be in. And his speechwriters are terminally online millennials, as Trado 2015 likes to say. But I mean, we also live in a place where Adam Kinzinger or Eric Swalwell, these congressmen or former congressmen that are soon to be kicked out because they lost their primaries, they got into a fight with a guy named Cat Turd, and one of them fell for the Ghost of Kiev Sam Hyde meme, which Elon Musk's Twitter has actually changed that. So anytime that someone posts a tweet where they're like, what's the word I'm looking for? They posted out this tweet saying, someone had said, oh, he can't keep getting away with this. Like, we found out that whatever happened in that club thing in Colorado, it was done by Sam Hyde. And then right underneath the tweet, there was this context that says, Sam Hyde is a comedian for $1 Million Extreme. He's been accused of multiple atrocities satirically. And it's like, oh, so the meme itself has died, and it's quite a strange place. It's a weird world to say the least. I don't know the entire story, Dylan Walker. What I can say is that, and I respect them to death, even though I ideologically disagree with them because they're honest people. But I mean, it brought to an end Slav and Correct Opinions they have their own podcast now called These People Are Sick, but CRK took a step back because I really do think being called dissident right or neo-reactionary in that Vanity Fair article did a number on them. But yeah, I mean, it certainly tends to be the case. And context makes it even more funny. It's true. He can't keep getting away with it. But yeah. So these are the things that have been coming to my mind in regards to this weird Twitter ecosystem and a flex of how much power maybe the online posting side of things has, because we have, very effective interlocutors for these ideas. We have people that can intercede on our behalf to much larger accounts and things like that, to where, you can potentially get a tryout and get heard and have these ideas spread out the way that they do. But on the other hand, the sensible center rolls off the tongue quite nicely, says Paul Moosefoot. The other thing that definitely also should be brought up in this regard is that this is going to be a test of just how much influence do you have. Are we going to see, for instance, right, when Elon Musk had been talking about that he considers himself neither ideologically left or right, or maybe what he calls himself a sensible centrist, I would pause the brakes real quick and be quick not to inflate one's ego. Excuse me. To ensure that it's not. I mean, there's no real effective way to gauge your influence other than maybe specific terms or people referencing you. Um, Alternative avenues, you can still send it in. I will read it on air if you do. So, I mean, yes, you don't have to pay Susan. It's up there. I will listen to it. You can send it in regardless. But anyways, feels like the DR is winning against its own will. I would love to, if you could elaborate in the chat, Bullfrog. I'd love to hear more on this. Feels like the DR is winning against its own free will. Interesting. Or its own will. So, I mean, we're being compulsored to victory regardless of what life looks like and things like that. So that would be interesting. I would say no in this regard, but I'll wait for Bullfrog to full out in the comments. But I don't know if he's a leader. I know that there are people that are fully on board with him, which I'm very curious as to what that purpose is, unless it means that they're going to be doing some kind of, full-on campaign on certain questions about certain ethnic groups. And I mean, if that's all that you're going to be running for, or that's all you want to do, then sure, right? I mean, when's the last time that doing something like that kind of worked? So I don't know what he's planning, and in fact, I don't know enough, and I don't want to comment on it, because to me, the last thing I saw from The Hill was talking about that, they brought Nick over, and Trump didn't know who that guy was, and it's been, and the first thing I also saw was that The Hill called it this like sort of it was sort of meant to be a hit piece where they said that, Donald Trump had always met with this, infamous white supremacist. And it's just like, well, if that's the case, then this looks like a hit on Trump, regardless of how it's met or how people might read it. So I do think that that's going to be the case where that's regarding Kanye West and all that stuff. But again, I mean, I'm sure someone in the comments after the stream is done is going to tell me the exact opposite, right? But this is where the other thing that also came to my mind has been also this conversation about Caesarism. Because Lord knows that we've been talking about Caesarism as long as I've been around. So that probably means you should add 4 or 5 years to it, right? Where people are talking about the Spenglerian sense of Caesar, or the infamous crossing the Rubicon bit when it came to January in 2021. And so there's just a lot of stuff that definitely comes to my mind about, well, are we going to have a red Caesar? Are we going to have a blue Caesar? I feel like that ultimatum meme bit there, and to me, it just seems like, well, okay, if that's what's going to come, most likely it'll be a blue Caesar that makes it look like the red team is winning. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. Like, it's not like, I think that it's kind of clear that, like, well, the trads aren't winning anytime soon. The most right-wing thing that I've noticed on this regards to Elon Musk is that, well, he says that, well, if you're going to have sex, it should be for the purpose of procreation. And so not just to enjoy your bit there. And that's something that definitely came in regards to it. So now I guess we're getting this sort of purplish Caesar, the sensible centrist Caesar, where he has managed to fire an effective amount of the Twitter workforce and turn the company and has more or less told, and I love what this whole Elon thing brought Nick Land back from Twitter death and brought him back from his hiatus, because every time that he takes a break off Twitter, everyone just memes on the fact that he's been eaten alive in some Chinese wet market. But he was commenting and saying that, like, Elon Musk firing all these people illustrates that you could probably get away with firing a good chunk of the federal bureaucracy, and that FedGov would be a lot more effective and efficient that way. So a lot of that old neo-reactionary style thinking, I guess, has gotten back in popularity. But I mean, in the same way that in 2016 and even in 2020, a lot of traditionalist Christians had, rallied around the flag to support Donald Trump, even though he's not a traditionalist individual, because you don't need someone to speak on those issues in order to do so. And I think that that's something that Barack Obama, or Garrick from Star Trek DS9, Garrick Obama. I love his account. He does a really good stuff for history and research. And he was talking about one of the reasons why the Midwest kind of got hammered the way that it did, and as well as states like Pennsylvania, is because they dived in on the social mores. They dived in on sort of the socially conservative side of MAGA. It didn't focus so much on the issues of like law and order, immigration, trade, things that actually apply to that those regions, in the same way that, the reason why, like, the fight in Ohio for the Senate between Tim Ryan and JD Vance, what were they talking about? The same stuff that they were talking about in 2016 and 2020 about trade, about the worker. It was the stuff that you couldn't really tell the difference between which candidate was saying what, other than more or less on personality. And they were all focusing on like trade, law and order, making sure that the family had money, how to tackle inflation. Like, the two campaigns ran very similar economic strategies. And it sort of reminded me in the same way that in 2016, you had a roughly 15 to 20% overlap between Bernie bro white male voters in the Midwest who voted for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary, but voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election versus Hillary Clinton. And so, to me, it illustrates that we're going to see a lot more of that sort of focus come back into the fold. And I think that that's why I personally believe that one of the things that maybe the dissident right should be doing, and one of the things that I want to take more of my time on, if I can, make more money off of this, or to dedicate or, take advantage of a normie part-time job and just pour my passions into this, is that, policy positions and white papers would do a lot to help influence people that listen to us, whether it is in the media or it is in Washington, because Lord knows that quite a bit of the dissident right is being listened to. Now, I don't mean to advocate for a Fabian style strategy. Oh, no worries, Bullfrog. We can comment later. We'll get to it. And I know that the Fabian strategy doesn't work for the right. Everyone from Moldbug to Rothbard to Nick Land to even older conservative writers have talked about as to why, even Carlyle to some extent. But it definitely does come to my mind that policy matters. And I think that was a big reason why to do a little midterm autopsy was, it wasn't candidate quality. It wasn't it wasn't the issues, because the issues matter. But to me, it seems that, well, what do we stand for? What are our policies? What is, dare I say, what is the GOP's, or what is the right-wing positive vision? Because yes, we can clear them out, but how do you sell to both elites and even your neighbors? What do you stand for if you're not talking about, well, what are you, I can be against progressivism all I want. I can be against leftism. I can be against, drag queen story hour, all that I want. But I do think that it behooves us to create a position where we should have an idea of, hey, what are we actually for? I think that the GOP did suffer because I think, for instance, like Blake Masters, well, I think he's a fantastic candidate and he said all the right things and he said all the things that I wanted to, but it's just like, oh, well, what policies does Blake Masters want to do in the United States Senate? What are the things that he wants to talk about? And the coolest part about Blake Masters' campaign is where he replied to somebody on Twitter, and I think it was Shu of all people, where he was just like, here is my plan to make sure that we can raise a family on one income and return to this traditional family style of raising our children where the father is the breadwinner and the mom takes care of the kids, and that these children are properly socialized, especially in an age where single parent households are rising through the roof. And I mean, that's I think Im has a good point here. Coke's brand can't be, we're not Pepsi. But the same time, Coke has always sort of been in charge. Coke is Coke. I mean, it's powerful. It's well known. It's established. Everybody knows what the Democrats are up for. And so it can't be that for the right wing, it can't be for the GOP, for whatever we on this part of the right want to do. We can't be asking people, and we can't be asking, especially wealthy elites, we can't be asking them, is Pepsi okay? We can't do that. We've been doing that for years now. And yes, there's a blind taste test and everything where Coke and Pepsi are virtually identical. I'd say that that's BS. But we shouldn't be doing that. And Steve, we've been doing a lot of that stuff though too, right? Is that we won't teach your kids to hate themselves for their ancestors. We won't castrate your children. I mean, those are great alternatives, but the problem is that how do you rein in the socialization and narrative control? And so this is where it kind of goes twofold, right? One is the fact that you would need to find some sort of you would probably need to find. I mean, this is where Christopher Rufo has been the most effective. Naming and shaming, like, for all the flack that my friend Stained Haynes likes to talk about, which is regards to notice and move on. Noticing and pointing out, like, libs of TikTok is probably one of the most effective, like, right-wing mimetic stuff that's ever been out there. I mean, like, holy crap, all of a sudden we're just reposting what these crazy people are posting and putting on TikTok and everywhere else. And it's led to people getting fired and allows us to recognize this is your enemy. And we see it 24/7, 7 days a week from this woman posting time and time again. This is it. This is what we're dealing with. These are the people that want to cut your son's dick off. These are the people that are like, grooming your kids. And, it's not like Christopher Rufo for all of his issues, right? He's not going to call the system anti-white in the same way that, unfortunately, the woman that runs Libs of TikTok congratulated Dave Rubin for trafficking 2 children and calling them his future child. And so that stuff that definitely comes to mind is that we should definitely be talking about how to create this world without acknowledging the left's existence. In my brain, I know that they're real. Evil is real. All the shit that they do is very true. But it tells me a lot that, okay, I don't want to acknowledge their existence. I don't want to dignify them with a response in based world 2.0 or whatever we get in the future. It really should be the truth of the matter should be some style of people with different conservative political beliefs, whether it's Catholics, Orthodox Christian, Protestant Christians, all living in the United States, more or less getting along, and policies are mandated in a way where we're moving in a rightward direction, and we're not going to acknowledge that the left exists or have any power. We definitely do give them, I think, rhetorically, we sort of force ourselves into a state of learned helplessness. Like, we've seen so many defeats before. We know what doesn't work, and so it's almost like the fly experiment with the lid and things like that. And it's just like, oh, well, they don't fly above the lid, and that's learned helplessness. That's the conditions in which they were raised in, and so that's what it becomes. And I don't want us to fall into that trap. I feel like the more we do it, but the other fun thing though too is that content also forces us to talk about these things. So here I am talking about the very people that I don't want to acknowledge exist or that aren't around, and yet at the same time, I know that I have to. That's the other problem is that I know all the time that I have to say, like, hey, these people want to like liquidate the kulaks essentially, and you're one of them by nature of either your race or your economic position or wherever you're at. But usually right now it's mainly because of race, and that tends to be where we're at least institutionally speaking. And so it puts us in a rather difficult spot to talk about them and propose our own vision as the alternative to them, but without sounding like we're just about the left. Because I don't want us to go back to 2016 SJW stuff, and things like that. And to me, that definitely comes to my mind. The other thing that I think is really important for us to address in this issue, of course, is that so many things are fractured. Twitter is a really great self-segregating way, the same way YouTube, Telegram, Gab, etc. all are. Is that we can be in this I don't consider myself in any particular camp. I'm friends with the guys that are sort of what you would call like the Baposphere. I've got the issues in regards to academic agent sphere and the YouTube accounts and all that sort of stuff. I'm many great friends in that lens. A lot of people that are involved in, Web 3.0 and Urbit. Like, I'm a little bit of everywhere. And the camps rather self-segregate, but there's a little bit of overlap, sort of like the famous, study about wolves and borders. Like, they actually respect their borders, and sometimes they'll cross over, but not very often. And the way that we do that here, of course, on Twitter and everywhere else is that we sort of acknowledge where we can agree. And Twitter is like the perfect format of what Turnip has talked about with this confederated model. We know where we can be friendly with. We know where we don't have to talk to. We know who is our enemies. And we know, like, based upon people that have blocked or have commented, that we can consider them bad actors. And in fact, sometimes we're so quick to rush to the defense of our friends that we sometimes block people, and people will ask, hey, can you unblock me? That's not what I meant. I had an unfortunate incident with that earlier this week because this account had gone out of his way to call out Turnip on his issue of, about the anti-American arc that came out of AA and such. And he had declared Turnip a non-friend. And I was just like, well, that's bullshit. Turnip's a friend. I'm going to defend him. And you should go copulate with a landmine if you disagree with these. Like, if you're not reading these takes and thinking that he's being some sort of pro, GAE supporter. And anyways, I get a DM from Turnip, and he's like, hey, this guy's asking to unblock. And he sent me the context of it all. And I was like, oh, so it was a miscommunication, a lack of nuance. And so it was unblocked and things like that. But more or less, Twitter does allow you to have ideological borders, some pretty decent ways to self-regulate and to emulate. I mean, Twitter has its own sort of like ways of growing. Like, well, maybe you start as a reply guy and you follow these guys. And if you start like putting things out there of your own thought or trying to put your own things out there, maybe you can grow and you can be, your own person on Twitter. Just don't make it your sole online presence or existence. That's why everyone should definitely be out there writing or other things like that. That's why I'm really happy about Substack, because like I said 2 years ago, I used to do these videos called Monday Morning Musings, which like every Monday morning I'd upload a quick ramble on a thought, which is now turned into my fishing videos because I can do that more. But I talked about the return of the blogosphere. Like, all of a sudden, everyone and their mother has a Substack, and I'm subscribed to like 75 of them on my own. And it allows me to sort of just see what are the neo-pagans talking about? What are the history bros talking about? What are the Christian nationalists talking about? What are the leftovers of the neo-reactionary sphere talking about? And what are Morgoth and AA talking about? Because I can read anything that Morgoth puts out, and it's usually gold. So those are the things that I find to be interesting, is that the online ecosystem has created a strong way to recognize borders, recognize where we're coming from, and overlap with one another. I find that stuff to be particularly interesting. And at the same time, right, is a little bit of catharsis in the midst of all of these rather a strange foreign man from South Africa has taken over Twitter, and all of a sudden people like Sam Harris and Claire Lehman have decided to terminate their Twitter accounts, out of, I guess, sort of some kind of solidarity, saying, well, this platform is garbage. We're going to try and put it out there. And this doesn't even begin to talk about the pressure campaign from the ADL and other activist groups that are saying, well, play along with these rules or else. So we're in some interesting unknown spaces, because I think this is the first time since that organization's inception. So what now, 110 years, where someone's openly kind of challenging it, which is even more interesting. So a lot of new stuff is definitely coming around. And what James Lindsay is talking about. Well, James Lindsay's back on Twitter, so everyone's favorite anti-woke new atheist is back to doing what's going on. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Glaucon, is that if you're smart enough to understand the factions without buying into everything it's intellectually enriching, I mean, this is why I try my best to call myself relatively independent. That isn't to cast shade or to cast aspersions on anyone that's gotten me to where I'm at. Like, I would be very ungrateful, or I would be very arrogant to say I got here on my own. No, I got here because of people like Oren, because of the distributists, because of Academic Agent, and because of all the other mutuals that I grew up on, like in college, listening to and watching. And now all of a sudden I'm sort of their colleagues and such. So, I mean, those are the things that definitely are important. But I call myself independent because I'm not in anyone's specific camp. I have loyalties to my friends, as everyone should. We are called to, especially as Christians, right, to love our friends and to have a kind of love to defend them and put ourselves out there on the line for them. But I'm not saying I'm in any specific camp. I call myself a realist writer and podcaster, and I guess a dissident rightist in some ways. But yeah. Oh, and yeah, he's back on Twitter. I loved that. E. Michael Jones is back on Twitter, which that was the greatest quick follow by all means, right? His return tweet of I don't know the anime or whatever he was citing or referencing there, but just welcome back, Mr. Dr. Jones. It was quite entertaining to say the least. But at the same time, I think it's important for us to not get caught up in the celebrations, because there are still bigger and better things to, not better, but I mean there are bigger things and bigger fish to definitely fry. But at the same time, as Charlemagne and what I've echoed as well is that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be so quick to destroy or put down the fact that, hey, the material conditions on the battlefield is really, has changed. The front of this conflict has changed. And to me, that's a W. I mean, it's not ours. It's this, it's the same thing when a lot of people were celebrating the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Like, this isn't your win, right? Like, this ain't your W. This is the guys over on the other side of the world in Afghanistan. That's their victory. Don't cherish or relish in it too much, because it's not yours, but also because that really makes you a target for the authorities with this heightened security state that we live in. So we should probably be very careful about that. But at the same time, I can't say that I'm an Elon Musk fan by any way, shape of the imagination or form, but I can definitely say with good authority that the material conditions on twitter.com have improved to such a state that, some of our favorite people are coming back to Twitter this Monday. And isn't that exciting? And Lord only knows who might come back. It'd be really cool to see Parallax Optics or Spandrel get their Twitter accounts back. That'd be amazing. I'm trying my best not to swear. And so I think that those are things that we can look forward to. But that does not mean that we're going to see all of a sudden overnight us, getting to do the N-word or to talk about the JQ in ways that you would see in other platforms. Like, I don't see that happening anytime soon. But I don't think he actively hates. Yeah, I think Im's got the right point here. I don't think Elon actively hates us, and that's a big improvement from where we were. So yeah, I mean, we're it's the never-ending. It's the never-ending cycle. It's the yin yang of it's so over and we're so back. So yeah, I mean, all people can be, for sure. Oh, you're who was the philosophy guy who you're referring to Stefan Molyneux, who unfortunately got unfortunately just depersoned, right? He was taken off of Twitter, he was taken off of YouTube, more or less all at the same time as the pandemic had started in 2020, and he sort of got kicked off YouTube in the same way that Dave Cullen got kicked off Computing Forever. But unlike, Dave Cullen, who one has a whole other YouTube channel that still exists there, the Dave Cullen Show, where he talks about science fiction and sort of that normie ranting about media stuff that is a guilty pleasure of mine, because he and I have a lot of similar tastes. But Stefan Molyneux kind of like he's still around. He's on BitChute. He has his own. He still does his like call-in show, but he's surprisingly active on LinkedIn of all platforms. Yeah, well, I didn't know that. So there you go. He's on Molyneux. I mean, no idea, but he was massive. His channel almost had 1 million subscribers when he was taken off. It was like at 973,000. So even for him to have a Twitter presence and comeback would be huge for whatever projects he's doing now. So I mean, yeah, I mean, we have to remember that this stuff is coordinated, and it's still, like I said earlier, even in this stream, it's really important for us to not get so excited that all platforms are going to change. Like, all of a sudden, we can't expect that the same conditions are going to apply to YouTube. That's why we still say certain words. We have to be very careful about what we say on here, especially if you're monetized, right? Those first 90 seconds and those last 90 seconds are really, really important. And in the same way that, I don't expect that all of a sudden Google Pay's rules are going to change and things like that too. So we should be very careful. But at the same time, I think whatever gets labeled as hate speech or whatever, and we've already seen that with the question over Alex Jones, right? The big word nowadays is denialism. So they had changed the terms of service to talk about certain events in history, not just mid-century events, but also more recent ones, like in what happened in Sandy Hook, or most recently in September 11th. So yeah, I mean, he is also looking in ways to monetize it for content creation. So I mean, he's trying to make this as profitable as possible. The blue checkmark system is going to change. That way, it's going to have 3 different tiers, gold, silver, and then the blue check mark. So one's for like governments, one's for public, companies and things like that. And then the blue check marks will be like the verified accounts and the people that pay for it with Twitter Blue, which is kind of funny. We were joking about this the other day because the Old Glory Club is a registered LLC. We can have it with its own blue check mark. So things are going to get very interesting on Twitter, to say the least. And I think that'll be something that we definitely need to look forward to in the future, right? Is what will happen. And then there are certain events like that you can definitely talk about. This is sensibly centrist, as they definitely like to say. But I've been going on for a little bit of an hour on this discussion in regards to the ecology of what Twitter is going to look like after all these accounts come back. I think that we're definitely going to see the things that are going to emerge when all these old accounts come back and things like that. I think it'll be an exciting time, but I do think that it's going to be like when 2 galaxies collide, the old and new, for sure, in the future. So things like that are going to happen. And the reason why it's a registered business like that, Trado, is because it allows us in the future to do things like events, publishing, and other things in the future that we want to do, such as the call for mutual aid. So there's a lot of big stuff that are going to be going on in the future with the Old Glory Club. It's not just going to be for content creation. That stuff is our mechanism to generate revenue. So in the future, we can do things like host events, call for mutual aid for when our friends are in hard times, whether by natural disaster or some leftist doxes them and things like that. So we're moving towards that in the future, but and even do things as certain events. So yeah, well, maybe certain event. There you go. I know you have a YouTube channel, so people can go check you out. It's not a charity, Kai. It is a business, but we will be doing things that will eventually lead towards more philanthropic activities to where you can donate. But of course, right now, there's ways to support it through the current means that we have. But in the future, there will be more available. So stay tuned. That's why you should subscribe to the Old Glory Club, follow it on Substack and all of our other links. So yeah, I mean, be sure to do those things. It's always important for us to find ways for not us just to be online YouTube commentators and things like that, but also to do things on the ground, because I think it's very important that if you're going to do things online, you should also walk the walk IRL where you can. I mean, that's why a big part of my focus has been, especially throughout 2022, is to talk about digital deracination and being overly online, because it's so quick for us to fall down the rabbit hole of online spheres, interests, politics, and so on, that we shouldn't lose track of the things that are important, and that's usually our families and what's right outside our window. And Raging Mandrill will be out with a new article in the OGC on Monday. So things like that are definitely going to happen. It will be here for explicitly in America. It is an American-focused organization. But of course, we will always encourage basket weaving and to generate mutual aid and support where possible in other places. I mean, what the guys over, with the Skildings event in the UK and what they've been doing for basket weaving, their Praxarchy, website and things like that are stuff for us to be very, very important in the future. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Super Chats. I think a good hour-long conversation on a rather impromptu topic will be, I think is good. So, of course, I know it says I'm offline on Entropy. I need to figure out how to fix that for when I'm streaming simultaneously here. But you can send your Super Chats through Entropy if you don't want to pay Susan. I will, of course, check on those regularly because I have access to it now. And then we'll go through Super Chats here and we'll wrap out shortly afterwards, because I still have some things I got to do around the house, and then I've got Vespers this evening. So we'll start up with entropy, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, so alternative avenues for $5 US says, one dissident right black pill today is that we can't affect change because of elite theory mechanisms. Do you think there's still a chance for any meaningful anti-establishment opposition to form behind a label like sensible centrist? Seems like we're awaiting the next steps. Well, I think that, and this is all sort of unfolding, and I may just get feedback in the group chat that I'm in with AA and a few others in a little bit on this, but to me, it seems like this topic of sensible centrism, both from him and Carl, is that if you can somehow take back the Overton window, and again, this is where I think that Dave's point about flexing power we don't have comes to mind. But if you can somehow take the Overton window of what's considered the sensible centrism, right, of this post Oberfell v. Hodges world where, veterans like that guy in Colorado, I fought for their right to do a drag show at a gay bar. If you can somehow take it back to maybe if the sensible like centrist is just like what Republicans were arguing for in the, dare I say, if you go back to the 1990s and you make that the sensible centrist thing, and that means the normal right-wing stuff that a lot of people are advocating for today is what the mainstream, right is talking about, that would be a win, I think, in regards to sensible centrism. I think that the question is can you get the vanguard to move it in that direction where sensible centrism is immigration control, reshoring American businesses, and ensuring that, white people aren't dying en masse to opioid epidemics or just the fact due to immigration. I mean, to me, that would be like an amazing way to call that stuff centrist. That would be the win. But I don't know how much you can call that sensible centrist, because when people again think centrism, and even big wigs at the top, right, when they think centrism, they think middle of the road, pragmatic, compromising politics. So I don't know how effective the label will work, but like many experiments in mimetic engineering and trying to get a message out there, Lord only knows. And like you said in your super chat, alternative avenues, I do think that we are awaiting what the next steps will look like in that regard. But, if I can tell people that, hey, immigration restrictionists are actually like the sensibly moderate position, it would be a huge W in my book in that regard. So, yeah. But then again, dark humor is like food. Not everyone gets it, especially in Africa. So you just have to pay attention and act accordingly. So I'm going to scroll up to the top. And now we'll just go dive on in and look for... there we go. Monothalmos for $2. A very comfy start time, by the way. Well, good. That's what I wanted to. I wanted to find a good time in the afternoon on Saturdays that can accompany my European international audience and my American audience. To me, I know that according to my YouTube analytics and stats, my half of my audience is from the United States, or like 51% is from the United States, and then like the 49 point something percent is from the rest of the world. And my subscribe star, which you should support, is equally the same way. I've had everyone from Russians to Japanese to Polish to Central Americans to people in Canada, besides just Americans, support the channel in any way, shape, or form that they can. So I have a very international audience of frogs, which I'm very thankful for, and I will continue to be thankful for. I'm very humbled. I find it absolutely insane that even on Twitter, some 10,000 some odd people decide to think that my shit posts and my ideas are worth listening to, which is insane. But nevertheless, here we are. And I have to be very mindful of that in regards to all things that I do. So let me go ahead and keep scrolling through for a little bit. We peaked over 200 live viewers at the same time, which was awesome, by the way. I'm greatly appreciative of it. The more growth, the better. So I'm very, very thankful in regards to all things. But let's see here. Scroll. Chat's very active. There we go. Raging Mandrill for $4.99 US. Thank you so much, good sir. He says, it might not be RW, but I think that we might be the primary beneficiaries of the conquest of Twitter. Well, I mean, was this not all more or less kicked off because the Babylon Bee got banned off Twitter? I mean, they're not the world's most sensibly right-wing extremist people. I mean, I follow some of the producers from the Babylon Bee, and some follow back. I know that what they post is way more milk toast Facebook mom and dad conservatism for like Gen Xers and millennials than it is for what we do. But I think that, if they benefit by some extent, we definitely benefit as well. And so I think that we should definitely be taking advantage of that in any way, shape, or form that we can, especially in this political environment that we're currently in. So I'm going to just scroll up real quick because I think I skipped one. But yeah, no, I'm very thankful for where things are going. I think that it is a W that we shouldn't ignore in any way, shape, or form. But also recognize the fact that, hey, let's not be so harmful to ourselves. In that regard. In that regard, sensible centrism is the West Wing. I don't want to go to that because if you were to rewatch the West Wing now, Aaron's like, I would love the Republicans of the West Wing to come back now, where they're just like, we're going to cut the taxes, we're going to fix the border, we're going to make English the national language of the United States. And I'm like, I want those guys. I want the Aaron Sorkin 1990s, Republican nightmare to be the Republicans of today. But we need to. Maybe we should be very careful in that regard. So I'm certainly rather concerned in regard to what that might look like in the future. So yeah, I mean, I'm very worried as to what that might look like if we, say that we're sensible centrist, and then we either alienate our entire audience, or everyone's just like, well, now he's on the sensible centrism bit, and he's just siding with whatever's in power. Which you need to stand for things. I'm sorry, like I know that I don't want to waddle into things about like ideology, but it does help to have first principles, and I don't think that we should be just siding with power for the sake of power. I think that illustrates a lack of a certain spine, but those are just some of my opinions there. And now everyone's arguing over beer in the chat. I don't drink anymore, but by God, when I could, I loved Pabst Blue Ribbon. So maybe that just illustrates my father side of the family coming from Wisconsin that tells you that I liked PBR. Pat Buchanan is sensible centrism. Well, there you go. That's what I would like. I would like the right of today. If we're going to go back to the 1990s, I want my Jack Kemps and I want my Pat Buchanans of the world, and I want my what's the word I'm looking for? And my Sam Francis's of the world to come back. But if it's a rhetorical op, then I mean, yeah, I know you were talking about this with Zero HP Lovecraft on Twitter's Cyberpunk Internal Affairs. If the ideology remains, like if we're still going to be right wing, we just change the name, then I'm okay with that. I just hope that, the people that are smart enough are following along with it, and hopefully that they do. So yeah, everyone is arguing over beer, and I love this. Yeah, for me, it was always Pabst Blue Ribbon, or it was Dos Equis. Those are the things that I would usually get at when I was at the pool hall, more or less like 3 or 4 nights a week after work. That's where I would go for sure. So things that come to mind. But that looks like that is it for the super chats. I'm going to refresh Entropy one more time. And then while it is Saturday, and I know that there's no Frog of the Week for today, but what I will do, however, is conclude, as I have been reading from the good book. So I've got my Bible right here. So I'm going to refresh it. And it doesn't look like we've got anything today, which is okay. But here we go. Oh, what was my job when I was like going to the pool hall all the time? I was a grant writer. I did a lot of nonprofit work when I was in El Paso. So that's definitely the stuff that I just really enjoyed. And so with that, in the spirit, I guess, since it is, we are in the midst of our lovely Advent season, and it would be a very good time for us to appreciate some of the other things going on in the world, or at least in the Old Testament, I mean. So let me get to the part that I want. I should really do a better job of just marking where I want to read from for these. There we go. Perfect. So Yes, well, I will make it up next week, I promise. But here we go. So we will be reading today from the Wisdom of Solomon. I'm not going to do it in regards to how it's liturgically read. But for those of you who haven't read the Wisdom of Solomon, I highly recommend that you do. There's some great stuff in here. There's some great Christology, which I'll be reading from. So I will be reading from the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, verses 12 through 24, and then we'll roll out from there. So let us lie in ambush for the righteous man, because he is useless to us and opposes our deeds. He denounces us for our sins against the law and accuses us of sins against our upbringing. He claims to have knowledge of God, and he calls himself a child of the Lord. He has become for us a refutation of our purposes. Even seeing him is a burden to us, because his life is unlike that of others, for his paths go in different directions. We are considered by him as a hybrid, and he avoids our ways as something immoral, and considers the last things of the righteous as blessed, and pretends that God is his father. Let us see if his words are true. Let us put these things to the test at the end of his life. For if the righteous man is the son of God, he will help him, and deliver him from the hand of those who oppose him. Let us test him with insult and torture, that we may know his gentleness, and test his patient endurance. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for there shall be a visitation because of his words. And so they reasoned these things and were led astray, for their malice blinded them, but they did not know the mysteries of God, nor hope for the wages of holiness, nor judge the reward of blameless souls. For God created man for immortality and made him an image of his own eternity. But death entered the world by the envy of the devil, and those of his portion tempted. So that is the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, verses 12 through 24. That is from the Septuagint translation that you'll find in the OSB. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you've heard a lot of good things about the good book and the good news. But with that, I hope that you are all doing very well. I will see you all next Wednesday on the Cigar Stream as we talk about Nicolas Saldo's concept of Turbo America. And as always, there'll be some rather patron-exclusive stuff, including readings of the next book I'm actually reading right now. I wonder if I'll get in trouble for showing this one, but we'll put it out here. So I'm going to be reading What Went Wrong, The Creation of and Collapse of the Black Jewish Alliance by Murray Friedman. And Dimes and I are going to be reviewing it in January. But in the meantime, I will be reading chapters and the whole book on Subscribestar for you all to enjoy. But until then, I hope that you all have a very good rest of your weekend. I pray that you are all having a fantastic Thanksgiving with your families and that it wasn't rough and it was enjoyable and peaceful. And I'll see you all next time. Take care, and God bless.